John Grom, and welcome to our 278th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss congressional hearings and ask if they add anything of value to the quality of good government. Today's panel begins with Mike Reese of Howard Hanna Real Estate and newly elected member of the Wadsworth City Council. In fact, new member of the Wadsworth City Council. I understand they just swore him in.
Yep.
Then Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Susan Hanlon, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron. Then Patty Haskins, retired teacher of mathematics at Wadsworth Senior High and former member of the Wadsworth City Council. Mike, given the nature of the congressional hearings, do you think they really add anything of value to good government? And I am really anxious to find out what you folks say about this.
I guess they can,
Well,
or they can't,
the
depending
question
on the situation. So I did a little bit of research myself, to understand it further, and I think a lot of people don't understand what a congressional hearing is to begin with, and what the purpose is. The original purpose was intended, to gather information, to be able to conduct oversight, and also a big part of it is to inform the public. So it creates a public record of issues that will be there for posterity. It is also a way for lawmakers to introduce proposed legislation, investigate potential wrongdoings by members of government, and lastly, confirming high-level appointments, which we've had a few of those in the last few years that were pretty contentious. Interestingly enough, I found when I was looking this up that this system was actually based on the process by the House of Commons in England. So when the founding fathers created this process, that's what they looked at to create it, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. One of the things I wondered was, you always hear these hearings and people are brought up on investigations or whatever. Do they have any teeth? Do they really have any power to enforce any of the thing that they come up with? And what I found is, well, they yes and no. The problem is it relies on other governmental agencies, which if you have a stacked government one way or the other, I mean, nothing's going to get done because you refer to, the Department of Justice to prosecute, and they can just be like, well, we're not going to do it. So yeah, they can, if you have good government that in people that are willing to, step out of party lines to do what's right rather than to just ignore it altogether, which happens pretty frequently. And also a problem with these congressional hearings is they can take weeks, months, years to fully flesh out. And by that time, if you're on an investigation of the person that you're investigating might be gone. So it's a slow process. And yes, our government is meant to be slow, so things get done methodically. But sometimes too slow, I guess. Uh, Recently, they've become more of a venue for public theater, so that in political theater, where they're putting on a show for, they've become very partisan. So, you're putting on a show to score, political points, make the other side look bad kind of thing. And that happens very frequently these days. A lot of political grandstanding. It can be very biased. Uh, it's run by the chairperson of whatever or a committee brought up the issue at hand, so it can be very biased depending on the person running it. um, some of the other problems are you can have scripted testimony. There's a focus on media, and that's another big problem with it. Is these are media ready hearings, like get in front of the camera and score our points, make our side look good, that sort of thing. There's often reduced fact finding for these uh, hearings. So, they're not really going to do the research because it's not really in their best interest a lot of the times to do the research, especially if you're trying to make a certain point. You're not looking for necessarily the truthful outcome, but what you want the outcome to be. There's often a lack of resources and or staff in these hearings, which is a problem too. So, if you want a witness have a testimony from a witness, there's no, it's on their own to, if they live on the other side of the country, the government doesn't pay you to fly out and stuff. You have to do that on your own. So often there's a lack of witness testimony because people don't have the resources to actually come and do it. It's kind of voluntary. So it can be good to inform the public, but like I said, it's been used mostly in negative ways in recent years.
And Bryan, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to reclaim my time.
Sorry.
That seems to be the phrase that everybody uses when the expert or the individual that's getting grilled begins to answer the question, and it works both ways. I think it's become, and I agree, with Mike, that it's become more political theater. And I've watched some, and if you really want to get your juices flowing, sit there and watch as they ask these very long questions, and they give the individual, this is a yes or no. Do you? And they go on, and there's so many questions within
5 minutes
the question.
to ask the question. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's just yes or no. And you can't. And it's unfortunate that it happens on both sides of the aisle. One of my favorites is Senator Kennedy. I think is he from Tennessee or Kentucky, or he's from down there. He's a good old boy lawyer. And he certainly tees them up when it comes to the questions. And then obviously you got to get the whiteboard out. You got to get that large chart that you want to throw up. But I think that they've lost, I guess, the purpose of it. And when you're wanting to get FaceTime, you want to get in front of the cameras, this is a good place to do it. And, I think if they would take the cameras out of it, it would probably be a little more productive. And really get answers, because the individuals doing the questions obviously have had their staff do a deep dive, and they come up with the questions. And the expert has done their best, and you can tell who's an ally for that individual and who's not, just by the tone and tenor of the question. So I really think for political theater, yeah, I'm not sure we get a lot of answers out of them. It seems that the closed door congressional briefings get a lot more information to the congressmen and senators when they're involved. And I think that speaks to why maybe we should limit the cameras, because it's always great to ask this inflammatory question. And then the congressperson basically takes that video and clips it and turns it into a political ad, how they grilled XYZ, Robert Kennedy Jr., or how they grilled Pete Hegseth, or, the list goes on. So they both do it. I haven't seen one in a while. I usually get little clips, but yeah, I just think we've lost the whole purpose behind it, and it probably needs revamped so that we really can get some answers out of people. So that's where I'm landing on this.
What I hear you saying is that they do not offer anything to good government.
No, I don't. Yeah, and that's sad. Yeah, I don't see it being helpful. It's just gone so far to more of an attack mode.
It would be better off if they weren't televised.
Yeah. Oh, 100. I think 100%. I think that's why the Supreme Court is not televised.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Susan, what do you think?
Well, I agree with everybody that they certainly have lost their way, and they're not being used the way they were intended. And I think it's interesting that since 1990 to 2020, and I'm assuming nothing much has changed from 2020 to 26, there's been a 50% decline in the number of congressional hearings. In the 1990, they had, in that time period, they had an average of 1,800 per year. And in 2020, they were down to 900. So, and then also, the way it's supposed to work, there are two offices of the government that are meant to help congressional committees, and that is the Government Accountability Office and the Inspector General's office. And so, typically, what's supposed to happen is those two offices, they do all the research, right? And they're nonpartisan, and then they send recommendations to these committees. And then the committees then are supposed to say, oh, okay, we read that report. We would like someone from the Inspector General's office who gave us that report to come and answer a few questions. So, but there are currently 20,000 outstanding recommendations, 19,000, 14,000 from the Office of the Inspector General and 5,000 from the Accountability Office that have not been addressed. So they're just, and then on the other hand, they say, well, part of the problem is there's too much information and congressional staffs aren't big enough, that we need bigger staffs. But then you have these apparently wasted resources, all these people that work in the Inspector General's office and work in the Government Accountability Office. They're churning away doing all this nonpartisan research, and they're not even being invited. Like, those aren't the people you see in these hearings, right? The people you see are the people that they want to attack, and it's never just, we're trying to make a decision and we need some information. And so from that point of view, yeah, it's just one more example of how the people that we've elected to Congress are not doing their jobs. They don't even know how to do their jobs. I think part of the reason that the tone of the hearings is the way it is because there's so many attorneys in the room, and they think they're in court, and it's not court. And their quote, the outcomes of these hearings are not binding. They are just supposed to be, just like city council. The committee gets information from the staff, who are the experts, right? The committee asks them, can you get us more information about this? Can you get us more information about that? And then the committee makes a recommendation to council. It isn't binding, and then council votes on it. In terms of whether they have any impact, I do think they have impact because people get fired left and right. Once go back to the Ivy League presidents. I think the only one that survived the congressional hearings during the Palestinian, unrest was the woman from University of Pennsylvania, and the other ones they got fired. It's like and you can go on and on about it, and it's so yeah, they do have an impact. It's not the impact they're supposed to have. And it's just another example of this giant federal government wasting our money. So there.
Just to hear what you have to say.
You're right.
I agree probably with everything everyone has said, but I have a little different take. And the first I think I ever, as a very young child, had heard of a congressional hearing was the McCarthy hearings in the 50s, and they were quite salacious, and I was just very small, but I remember my parents talking about the first ones I actually watched were the Watergate hearings, and I very honestly watched them religiously, and that's one of the things that's good about being televised. Now, in the case of the Watergate hearings, they were broadcast in the evening so people could watch them. They were done during the day, but then they were rebroadcast at night. And were those impactful? Absolutely. And it also gave, I think, the people of the country more information. Not only were the congressional leaders getting that information, but we were getting information about what was going on. unfortunately, what has happened is, as everyone has said, is we have morphed into this situation where congressmen use their position on a committee to have sound bites. They want to preach to the people that are listening. And it doesn't even sound like they're, in many cases, that they're interested in getting answers. They're telling the person who is testifying what's going on and what they think. And no matter what they say, they're going to disagree with them. On the other hand, you see those that are testifying quite often absolutely refuse to ask questions. Now, yes, there are cases where they can't say definitively yes or no, but they also refuse to answer questions, and they've sworn an oath to do that. And they out and out lie, and nothing, seems to become of that. And it is, as has been stated on both sides, that I see this, and it's very frustrating, but it's still, I find interest in watching them because I like to see those congressional members who are actually asking questions, trying to get information. I want to hear those that are going to pontificate from that position so that that formulates my opinion of them. I want to hear how the future attorney general, how the future Secretary of Defense, how the future Secretary of State, how the future Supreme Court Justice answers questions, because that gives me information. And whether they lie, cheat, steal, just answer yes or no, refuse to answer, that's interesting to me. Now, again, though, as Bryan said, if you take the cameras out of there, then you get a more honest approach or honest answer to what's going on. But that kind of leaves us as part of our population to be in the dark as to what's going on. Then we're counting on getting an accurate transcript and being able to actually read what has happened. Recently, was it Jack Smith just testified, and he wanted to do it in public. And Congress decided that no, we have to do this in private. And they have released the transcript of this, but all we seem to be able to get are the biased opinions on various news stations as to what actually happened. So, yes, while it was probably a very substantial hearing that was held in private, we as a public are kind of left out of the details, I think. I think you can go online and find the complete transcript from that case, but I'm not sure. Oh, by the way, Bryan, Senator Kennedy's from Louisiana.
I'd like to extend and revise my remarks. That's another thing you hear a lot of.
Right.
I would separate an oversight hearing from a confirmation hearing.
I agree.
Or a special hearing looking into Watergate or something. I find those very interesting.
Right.
The oversight hearings are the ones that I'm referring to that just seem to be for political theater.
Well, and those are the ones that are supposed to be the main way those committees do their work.
Yeah.
Well, they're obligated to have oversight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But when it boils down to an oversight, when everybody's come loaded for bear,
right,
and that person is never going to get a chance to answer, I just don't think it's fair to the witness. Now, some of the witnesses need probably a little grilling, but if you're going to ask a question that's 3 minutes long, and the answer is either yes or no, that's unfair to the witness. You can't. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on or what expert is there to give testimony. You have to give them the opportunity to add context. Now, not to filibuster, but to add context to their answer, because it's not always a yes or no answer. And to me, that's unfair because they're just going to edit that and clip that down and make that person sound like an idiot, And they're not idiots. These are experts. These are people that have, like PhDs, they're crazy smart people. And when you just sit there and you pepper them with questions and you say, it's just either a yes or no, that's not fair. But confirmation hearings, I love those are great to watch. A special hearing, Watergate. I like to watch the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court justice because they get the opportunity to add context and depth and some breadth to their answers.
I'll add something about the confirmation hearings. Okay, I'm gonna say this. I don't mean it 100%, but I don't really think there should be confirmation hearings. I mean, it is the president, when someone gets elected president, it is their right to appoint people to offices. And, that's what always happens when these confirmation hearings get all wound up and crazy. You begin to hear this sentiment. Well, we won. We're in charge. We get to make the appointments.
Yeah.
And so the confirmation hearings to me are like the least important things they do. The most important that they don't do is they should be boring hearings of staff members talking about things that most of us, including the people that are going to vote whether to pass a law or not, don't know much about.
Yeah.
Well, still,
when you deal with the Supreme Court justice, that's a lifetime.
I know it is, but it's still if you get elected president, you get to appoint Supreme Court judges.
But
that's true. But I think the problem is
Congress.
Oftentimes when you're appointing somebody like that, it's like somebody recommended this person to you. You don't even know them.
Well,
I want to hear him speak because I want to know I'm not appointing an idiot.
But how often has it really changed anything?
Not very often, but it does. Sometimes they don't get appointed.
And all it does is bring up all the politics again, bring up all the partisanship, bring up all the fake. I mean, they're not constructive, I don't think.
Did anyone watch the hearings on the Minnesota fraud cases that were held? I think it was.
No.
I had some yesterday. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, some of it. And the interesting thing was, depending upon what station you watched, they only showed clips of it. And if it was on a station that leaned heavy to the right, you only saw the questions from Republican people that were questioning and answers. And it was the reverse when you watched a station that leaned toward the left. So unfortunately, by not just if you want to broadcast it, I think they need to broadcast the whole thing so that you get a complete picture of what was going on, because that was the classic case of people not being able to answer and very biased questions on both sides. So,
I think if they took the cameras away, the people wouldn't even show up. The congressman, unless they're legally required to show up at a hearing, they wouldn't even be there.
It would be on chairs.
Well, I think I'm sure you probably have, but when you listen to the oral arguments of the Supreme Court, you really get a sense as to how smart those Supreme Court judges. And I don't care if you don't like the people that were appointed by the Democrats or Republicans. These are very smart legal minds that put it to these guys. I mean, you kind of feel bad for them because it's like, wait a second, you just said this. Now, how does that square with X? And how does it come up with that? How did you reach that opinion? The guy's just a stuttering idiot. Standing there trying to answer them. It's crazy. I love that kind of stuff.
How many of you remember the Harold Carswell hearings into the Nixon administration?
I don't know who Harold Carswell is.
Okay. He was somebody that was nominated by Nixon, and they were holding a hearing, and he really came across being a little bit stupid. And somebody made the comment that he was really very mediocre as a candidate. And then a spokesman for Nixon said, well, even mediocre people have a place on the Supreme Court. That always amazed me. I mean, you talk about not having anything left to say.
Yeah.
Make a comment like that.
Pretty bad.
That's a little scary when you think about it.
Yeah.
But Brian, you said they have such great legal minds, and you're absolutely right. But sometimes I think you could do with some people that are a little more ordinary, because we had a show about the Supreme Court justices one time, and
Yeah.
I remember reading about how the opinions that they write are so intellectual, you can't even figure out how to operationalize them.
Yeah.
Like they don't know, people don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in finding out how well the Supreme Court gets along. I mean, I remember because Scalia and Ginsburg,
Yeah.
totally polar opposite in opinions.
Yeah.
They were
They were
very
good
close
friends
Yeah.
and really respected each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the case right now.
No, who's the youngest one? The youngest woman?
Amy Coney Barrett.
No, the one before. I guess she's not the youngest. The one before her, Jackson.
Elena. Oh, okay, yes.
I read about how she's really disliked because she refuses to, basically, not their words, my words. She refuses to go through the hazing because apparently there's a whole thing like the most junior Supreme Court justice, like they literally have to, if someone knocks on the door when they're in their conference room, they have to get up and go answer it, and she won't do it.
Interesting.
I think it was in the New York Times, this article about how she's having a really rough time because she will not play their game. She won't adhere to their traditions. And like they have to do something like when coffee comes, they have to take it around and, let everybody pick their coffee out. Yeah. So a staff member would bring coffee, knock on the door. That person is supposed to go get it and then walk around the table and hand it to everybody.
But those are lifetime appointments. So if you're the
problem.
junior member for like years, you're just getting hazed for years.
Well, and the other thing she won't do of more substance is she keeps writing these opinion papers that she's not supposed to write.
Right.
She writes them and puts them out, and she is not supposed to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite Supreme Court justices was Ginsburg. I can't recall her first name.
Ruth
Ginsburg.
Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
She was talking about a discussion over, among the members off camera about a certain issue. And she said, well, we weren't entirely sober at the time. And I got the biggest kick out of her for that. That's the one thing I'll always remember about her.
Yeah. And, that collegial atmosphere needs to exist.
Yeah.
And when you have people that are basically on the polar opposite, like Patty mentioned, on the political spectrum, Scalia and Ginsburg getting together and having drinks and having a dinner,
right?
You just want to be a fly on the wall.
Well, and it's because, and I do think it's because they're so smart, they can do that.
Well, and they respect one another. They respect that person is intelligent, and while their opinions are not the same,
they're
they
interested.
Can still be collegial and fair and civil to one another.
Yeah. Right.
And I think they want to learn. They want to learn from each other.
Right. Exactly. I mean, So I think that needs to be
in Congress.
That needs to be sort of modeled in Congress and in the Senate. I know there has been some movement in the Senate on some things.
Yeah.
Trying to get people together because you really have to work at building consensus in the Senate.
I just keep thinking, and it's pretty much putting my head in the sand, but once Trump is gone, this will all get fixed. I'm sure that's not going to happen. But
well, who surprised me is Fetterman.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's in Pennsylvania now. He's
I mean, I think that guy is obviously I might not agree with the way he dresses when he goes. The hoodie and the sweater. Maybe he might show up to city council with the hoodie on. You know?
Maybe I will. Who knows?
Yeah. But he has an opinion and he lays it out there. I listened to him on a podcast. I think it was with Joe Rogan. The guy's not stupid. He has had a stroke So
Well,
his
Yeah.
speech
we
is a
have
little bit
to-
of an impediment when it comes to his speech, but it's right down the line. He says, I live in a purple district. I have to be able to cross the aisle and see
Yeah.
the way things are. So yeah, that kind of a stuff I think would go a long way.
Okay, well, listen, at
Congressional
this
hearings.
point, we have to bid a fond farewell to our listeners, and we can continue this conversation after the break. Thank you.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.